shorties help me kill this shit, my shorties help me dance. We're on the floor killing this shit, productive romance. In the back of a limousine, fresh out of shower, feeling clean. Right with the D in dirty. Deep bouncers recognize us, we're the hottest ravers there. Strippers fall in love with us, babe, we say as no prayer. My shorties help me kill this shit, my shorties help me dance. Us, we're the hottest ravers there. Strippers fall in love with us, babe, we say as no prayer. My shorties help me kill this shit, my shorties help me dance. Us, we're the hottest ravers there. Strippers fall in love with us, say as no prayer. My shorties us, we're the hottest ravers there. Say as no prayer. Shorties recognizes the hardest phrases there. Say it as a prayer. Shorties. The hardest phrases there. Say it as a prayer. Shorties. The hardest phrases there. Say it as a prayer. Shorties. The hardest phrases there. Say it as a prayer. Shorties.
There we go. Is that gonna do it?
The hardest phrases there.
Do we have voice at this point? Is it magically doing the voice stuff? Let's find out. Let's find out. Hello, if anyone's actually hopped in. Do we have voice at this point? Hey, we do. Okay. Oh my god. I was a little more shrill than I thought it was going to be. Let's just test this. Does this still... This still comes in. Oh, that's wicked. All right, so the solution for anyone super curious, I'm using Voicemeeter to submix everything out, duplicate the output from Pro Tools, because anyone who uses Pro Tools knows it's quite the finicky program. So I use this to clone the output so you can actually hear Pro Tools out on stream, but I had to make sure my microphone could also come in without having to wire it through Pro Tools, and then if Pro Tools goes down, my voice goes down, and that's no fun. So stream's going to start in about 8 minutes. It's nice that this seems to be working without having to wire it through Pro Tools. Yep, just checking the stream. Still seems to work. I'll check the work view very briefly here. So this is about what to expect once we're in it. Voicemeeter submix is still set. Perfect. PC audio I can turn back on again. Or is it? No, because Voicemeeter is going to submix it. Okay, cool. Oh, hey, what's up? Tequila Otter in the chat. How's it going? I'll get the fat beats going again. There we go. So I'll just talk with the beats going.
I've got a bag. You fix when I break it. I've got a dick, yeah, I know how you take it. You make some photocopies, I spread the sheets. And you say DJ SARA M, would you
What's
please
up?
drop the beat?
Just getting the stream sorted, man. It's some fun. Voicemeeter, like as software, is really cool. I had to use it to do remote work and stuff, but it is touchy. It's like sort of like balancing a house of cards. Like as soon as it's set up, you just cannot touch it. So far everything seems to be playing nice, but we'll see how long that holds. I'm gonna demo some Pro Tools really quick, just to make sure you get sound.
New path reveals itself and delivers something mysterious and alluring.
So I think that should come through on stream. Let me just check.
And alluring.
So yep, that sounds like it did. Sorry that I'm just like checking stuff in the background here.
Not just in the old economic way.
Didn't realize that OBS disconnected the Voicemeeter submix from the actual source input, so that's why it was like not coming through for the longest time. Don't need PC audio right now. Actually, I don't need it at all. I'm using like I sent all the sound coming out of my PC through the Elgato sound capture. That's like wired as hardware input too in Voicemeeter. So everything I play should come through. Oh, I should probably get like a Where Live post going soon. And then future thinking, if any tunes sound interesting, yell at me about it. I just chose music that my friends have written or I've written, so it's all pretty safe to use, I'd hope. Fingers crossed. But yeah, some of it's out, some of it's not, so I can point the ones that are out, you know, the download links for everything. I'm loving this. Just like the cat gif as the pause screen. I just had to dig out like cat GIF, and I thought there'd be more like cats plus audio GIFs to choose from, but I figured cat mashing keyboard is like, that's pretty much editing. Anyway, I'm gonna take off, leave just the fat beats, and I'll be back in 4 minutes to post and start the show.
Discretion is advised.
Okay, I'm back in and I'm feeling pretty ready to start. It's 5 o'clock Pacific, just a bit after. Hello to everyone who actually came in and joined the stream. My name is HiImCurtisMc, and I'm going to be talking through my final as part of like a anniversary of my actual graduation from VFS. So this should be a pretty fun time. I have some notes, as this is like the first stream of hopefully many going forward, where I just talk sound design and do some sweet work on camera. So I'll pop into work view as I sort of get the introductions going here. So first of all, who am I? Hi, I just noticed Bex joined. What's up? So my short intro here is, my name is HiImCurtisMc. I'm a sound designer for video games based in Vancouver right now. I've also been a dialogue editor, a production sound mixer. I have experience with voice acting, hosting radio, broadcasting, and writing for radio, all sorts of cool sound and recording things. So these streams that I wanted to get going here are mostly just me working on my own personal projects for portfolio and reel and what have you, just to have something to keep me accountable working from home. This year's been super weird in that everyone's kind of stuck here. So it's hard to like go into an environment where you're surrounded with other people who are working and like getting on that sort of vibe and train. So this is something that hopefully will keep me like, okay, cool, I need to find a bunch of new videos to design for and share my process and still engage with sound design as readily as I would be if I were like working in a studio with people. Currently, I'm just streaming to YouTube. There's a lot of cool people who stream on Twitch, and Twitch is a super cool platform that I'm just totally unfamiliar with. I'm also wondering if there's sort of a different audience expectation, given that Twitch is a lot more of like a, you know, pay to subscribe to someone, that sort of premium platform. And because this is just a window into my work process, I super don't want to set that sort of precedent, if that makes sense. So YouTube, I'm pretty cool with, pretty chill times. I'm just going to stick here for now. However, like, send any comments, questions through the chat. I'll see it. I'm lucky enough to have 2 monitors, and I'm staring at the chat right now. So if you have any questions or want to say anything, I'll see it and I'll read it out to make sure it's there. So any upcoming projects outside of this sort of anniversary review, I've got some cool creature redesigns I want to do, some elemental magic, possibly some music that I'm mixing. Don't do so much composition right now, but I do mix a lot of it, and that is still a lot of fun to watch, I'd say. So first off, we're going to actually watch the final. I was hoping to get this uploaded on Instagram TV today, but something seems to hate me with the video restrictions, even though I tried to follow all the specs. So I pulled it up on my own Vimeo page here. We'll watch through it first, just so everyone here can see the final piece, and then we'll go into bit by bit in the actual Pro Tools session here. So with that, let's just sit back and watch this, and I'll be back right after.
Another day, another aimless adventure for little Clarice. She itches to discover something, making curious friends along the way. Absorbed in her forest wonderland, she leaves no path unconquered, always searching, hoping for that something to be unearthed. On this day, a new path reveals itself and delivers something mysterious and alluring. She itches to discover something, making curious friends along the way. Absorbed in her forest wonderland, she leaves no path unconquered, always searching, hoping for that something.
Quick pause as I noticed something went up there. Let me quickly correct my outputs and see if I can fix that. It's sort of like it's looping back, unless, can people in chat let me know if that was actually broken, or am I just like getting a weird feedback on my end? Oh, well, in any case, I'll just reverse it a little bit. It's just running out my PC here. Apologies for the pause. Huh. Well, that's cool. Let me quickly fix that. Anyway, so far, it stuttered a bit. That's it. Oh, weird. Because on mine, it was like looping back. Thanks. I'll just reset it if it was working just fine then. Yeah, appreciate it. It is like a spooky little piece. It's a lot of fun, I'd say. So I guess I'll just reset that, and we'll get back to it. Let's go back out through there. Hey, Roshan. There was a glitch. Okay. Okay, super weird. Why would you not? Why would you not? Anyways, let me try to get this one maybe. Let's see if this works. Sure doesn't seem to be working. Man. Sample rate issues? Maybe. I am just streaming it though. I'd hope that it would just like play through properly if I were to be streaming it. That's kind of weird. Because if I play through like sound capture, it seems to be okay.
Within, she heads back home with her intriguing item in tow. Her father welcomes his little adventurer home and asks about her outing. Overjoyed, she presents her bewitching find to her father. He urges her to return to the woods before something sinister awakens. Clarice returns home to her father's embrace, safe from the terror she met. Whether she shares this tale or not, she learned a valuable lesson. Maybe some secrets found in the deepest depths of the woods are better off left alone.
Awesome. So here's hoping that played through pretty well. Left the credits to kind of play isolated since I did leave the ambiences going for a long time, just to sit in the mood of this like empty, spooky woods. Also, of course, the VFS slate. So biggest shout outs to Something's Awry Productions, who originally made this film, The Gift of the Woods, please go check out the original as well if that was really interesting. I thought it was really cool when I first found this piece. It was something super different, and when I first saw it, my instinct was that it was mostly going to be a sound effects piece. It still stayed mostly a sound effects piece, but there was like a lot more dialogue than I'd first anticipated, and that's where we're going to start in this session. So up at the top, some parts in the session are broken since I'm back on a Pro Tools standard license as opposed to a Pro Tools Ultimate, so surround tracks and such aren't in the session anymore. Not too important when streaming, and most people, I'm assuming, watching now are using headphones or their stereo setup. But I will talk through some of the surround work I did for music and sound effects. Dialogue, not so much. It's like mostly in the center because it is a narrator kind of talking through the story here. So first credits should really go out to my voice actors and my writer for coming up with this great story and really executing it and giving it this unique little flavor. So big shout outs to Coolin Sonder, who was our narrator.
Another day, another aimless adventure for little Clarice.
Really great delivery. Had done a ton of work for everyone else in the class as well. Huge shout outs to him. Another huge shout out to Erica Kim, who voiced little Clarice here. It's like scared little voices that I really fits the character and gives it that like cute, wholesome little vibe. And shout outs to Corey Provost, who worked with me to help write a script out of the most like vague, wishy-washy artistic directions you could expect. It came out really well, sounded in this hybrid of like a storybook reader, but still had this foreboding and ominous feel to it. Yeah, Coolin is super overpowered. Big agreed, Roshan. So originally, when I'd seen this piece, I was like, wow, you can just tell this with maybe some like character exertions. So the work that Erica did, I did work on the father. I'll talk more about that closer to the end of the stream. But I thought it would just be exertions and like a silent sort of piece. Silent in that you only really get sound effects and a splash of music. During instructor reviews, at VFS, we'd sort of like choose our piece, and then we'd have to have a sit-down meeting with our instructors every week to kind of get feedback on what we're doing, make the piece better, get some perspective that we don't have, seeing as we're students and still starting out. So when I showed this to our instructor in our first meeting, he starts going off with like whatever narration, like, "Father knows the dangers of the woods." And like, as he's doing it, my first reaction was like, no, I want to do this without dialogue. I want it to be this super spooky, silent piece that unnerves all the parents in the audience kind of thing. But as he kept doing it, something in the back of my brain just went, damn it, you're right. You're right. Like this needs narration. So that completely changed my plans in week 1. Luckily, I knew Coolin's voice talents from working with each other throughout the year, both doing voice roles and knowing what he was capable of. So I reached out to him, and he was more than cool to help me out there. The writer, I luckily just happened into someone who was looking to do something at the writing campus. So huge shout outs to Corey for making the time for that, and like a 3-hour writing session that was like, oh man, it was a tough script to actually get out from the vague feeling I wanted to get, but he did a phenomenal job. Huge thanks to him. Erica also did really well on a different final for someone in my class, and so she was really great with coming in as well. So when it came down to actually recording it and directing people, Erica was cool with the character exertions. Coolin, it took a little bit of massaging to get the right tone, because listening through...
Another day, another aimless adventure for little Clarice. She itches to discover something, making curious friends along the way.
It still has that deep storybook narrator kind of feel, but it's still soft, kind of like wispy in delivery. So it took a little bit of running the lines over again until we got this sort of consistent tone throughout the whole piece.
On this day, a new path reveals itself and delivers something mysterious.
I feel like it came out really cool. it didn't sound like someone putting on a trailer voice and reading. It really felt like some voice that isn't someone telling you the story, but just the story being told, as if the world that this is set in itself, the trees, is almost like telling you what's been going on in this story. Really fantastic work. So for cleanup, actual more technical stuff here that's not so much direction, it was pretty standard, and I'm kind of content with how clean a lot of this came out in the end. So I'll go to the ending ones for contrast.
She learned a valuable lesson. Maybe some secrets found in the deepest depths of the woods.
So one thing on all these clips is the little RX Connect. I think we just had 6 on our computers at VFS at the time. So a lot of it was RX'd out, just getting rid of small noises, declicking, because you do have to get a little closer to the mic for that narrator feel. It was off enough that it wasn't too bad, but just a few spit clicks to get rid of that are always in there. On top of that, a couple light things. EQ just to get rid of this like low mid kind of sound in there. A couple sibilances up top that sounded a little sharp when playing through speakers, and of course some low cut, high cut filters. That just the term escaped me, but low cut, high cut to kind of fit the not quite X curve, but just make it sound comfortable, so it's not like rumbling where it shouldn't be because it's a human voice, and it's not like piercing at all. On top of that, just ran de-essers over some of
Maybe
this.
some secrets found in the deepest depths of the woods.
Just to get those like really sharp S's out of there. So that was one around 7700 hertz and one around 7480 hertz. So both of those are pretty close together, but it's just like those were the ranges that were ringing when taking it into the theater and mixing this whole thing. On top of that, it was sent through the chain that, sadly, I don't have all the super cool pro plugins to reopen again, but pretty regular stuff. A limiter just to control what's actually going into your chain, making sure nothing's clipping going into your plugins. Q10, so waves EQ that I don't have on this machine, just taking out more of those like aggressive peaks. RDSers across the entire thing, getting more of the like the S's across all characters, since this is the sort of dialogue chain that everything would run through. And we did have to do one session of touch-ups just because the script edited a little bit. So these touch-ups also ran through the same thing, but it being recorded on a different day, it didn't need as much de-essing as the first take. So this sort of went across both of those days and got rid of those like big ranges around like between 3K, 4K, 6K. On top of that, it goes through a multi-band dynamic compressor. I can't fully remember the settings. I think I left it pretty stock, though. I didn't feel like I needed to crush his voice too much. Because we had this thing, the best friend, as our instructor Brad would always say. This is just set to a level where it's coming through more or less untouched, but if there's any intense peaks of volume when Coolin was speaking, it'd just tame those out. And at the very end, EQ, I think this was more of like as I was setting the de-essers, I left this on just as a global thing to check what was still sounding too harsh so I could actually set the de-essers properly. But at present, it's not doing anything. Now, usually it would run into verbs, but as there's a huge difference between software on the VFS computers and my home computer, I don't have the reverb plugin Revibe 2 that we used, and the buses had to be deleted since they were surround buses. But the verbs I applied didn't really move outside of the screen, so like LCR. So that's like your left, center, right channel. Kept it there because everything's on screen, and it is dialogue. Like, there were other vocal elements that got panned around in surround, but dialogue is kind of like forward, like someone speaking at you. Also, so everyone in the theater can actually hear everything at whatever position they're at. Roshan asked, did you use new verbs for the new mix? I didn't actually give this piece a new mix. If I did, I probably would. Although I'm not sure which verbs I would use for this piece again. I just went for like really nice sounding rooms, basically, so that it would sound pleasant. Using reverb that fits in a room makes it feel musical. Music played in like a jazz club, what have you. Blanking on the exact setting because it has sort of been a little less than a year since I really touched it. So I'd have to, if I were to like get back into VFS somehow and check, I'd let you know. But yeah, if I were to remix it, I'd go with new verbs, something limbo-y. Limbo is another huge inspiration that I'll probably touch on when we get into the Foley's. Though that altogether is a lot of my work for the dialogue, and a quick isolated clip of yours truly doing some. Which is a little boxy, has a pitch shift because I didn't want it to be my voice. My actual voice tone was starting to clash with Coolin's. We share sort of a similar range. So I tried to pitch shift it out. I think this was like my last week before delivery though, so that's something I would definitely put more thought into. Probably cast someone else, but in some notes I was going to talk about that closer to the end when I just talk through reflection, things I've learned, etc. So the next big part that I didn't expect to use a lot of in this piece was music. Now, with dialogue, I really had to change that from no dialogue and just exertions to full narration, full writing, telling the story. With music, luckily, there wasn't a lot. So all we're seeing here is all there was in the piece, which isn't too bad at all. It leaves a lot of room for sound effects that can almost be musical, but really take up a huge part of the mix. So for this one, I've got to give thanks to a really close friend that I met in the program, Alexandre Barbosa. He actually composed the music, handed me the MIDI files, and then I did the instruments, mix, etc. in Ableton, and came up with these separate layers from his original piece. So huge thanks to Alex. Please try to go follow him. He's an excellent composer, I'd say. So if we just listen to the music in isolation to kind of get an idea of what's going on with these layers. Side note I should have said during the dialogue, if at any time I could turn something up, please let me know. A lot of elements in this session were mixed for theater as opposed to internet, so it's kept pretty low in level to match standards. So if you need me to crank it up, I do have a master with like a limiter that I could just increase, so please let me know. But yeah, the music is really cute. It has that like childish nature, but also eerie feel that a music box kind of gives you with that sort of work. Alex was really inspired by the RPG Maker game Ib and its soundtrack, which sounded really cool and had the exact mood that I was going for. Something really cute in the opening as we sort of get Clarice wandering through the woods. It's really cute. The timing on when the bug actually shows up on screen. Oh, oops. Let's not isolate that. You get this really quick, like, light-sounding phrase right as this cute bug shows up in this dark forest. And then as we pass the tree, we get this darker turn of like, oh no, something sinister in these woods. So that was something I was really happy with. Setting a really cute expectation up with the music, like, oh, it's going to be a cute 2D piece. Look at this like little girl wandering through the woods, looking at this cute little bug. And then we get this like, what the hell, scratched on a tree kind of horrific imagery that sets the expectation for the rest of the piece and kind of messes with the audience, which is something I thought would be funny, is going with like, since it was a horror piece for sure, really playing into the cuteness first and then going horror to kind of surprise everyone in the audience. So the next part of music is this fearful memory as the father is remembering his own encounter with the creature. Which is this sort of like slower, moodier take on the main melody. The next part that comes up right before the big chase scene and the confrontation here is this just diminished chord. It's the classic, like, I'm in danger chord. And that plays in with some other more musical sound effects to build this tension before the creature launches at Clarice. And then the ending theme is more or less the same, a little bit slower, and plays a little bit more, like, less upbeat and cutesy and more like, we've just had an experience, this is our cool down from this, but it's returning to the same musical framework that set it up as a cute piece to start. Oh, oops, I forgot a fifth layer we added, which is just some pizzicato strings, which is very, very light. I'm probably just going to take a second and turn up the project. Just so you get a bit more volume out of it. There we go, that's better. Oops. Few clips that were definitely carried by the original reverb, which, given how much I pushed the music into the surround, definitely doesn't work on Pro Tools standards, so huge sorries on that one. So each of the layers has its own different kind of feel to it that I chose when looking for instruments in Ableton. The first is this music box that really plays with the innocent, childlike thing, because we think music box, we think of like children when it comes to this. Now, I believe this was a mix of two music box samples, or sample instruments, I should say. One being like the stock Ableton one, and one being, I believe, 8 Dio's music box. The sort of like stock, quote-unquote, MIDI music box from Ableton Bass Pack being more the tone of the music box, and then 8 Dio's sampled library having more of the mechanics and sort of grittier parts of a music box. The next layer is a glockenspiel, which in the end of the piece, I layered in a piano to it for a piano spiel of sorts. And to contrast with the piano spiel. So the piano gives it a bit more of like a finality in a weird way. That's my favorite. Yeah, it's a really cool layer, I think. Still has that innocent sense, but it's a lot more delicate because you get that like tiny metallic sound to it. The next one, which pretty much just lived in the surrounds for most of the piece, actually like all of it, I pushed this in surrounds really hard, is the Spitfire Audio Labs Handbells, which is a free sample library. If anyone watching is into composition, go and check out Spitfire Labs, like amazing free sample instruments. But this has the really eerie, ghostly tone that I loved in this piece. Like it's this weird, ethereal, beyond all the other like more typical instruments that you can imagine, but it still rings that melody along. So it sits really well as this like globulous, eerie thing behind your head as you're watching in a theater. And of course, the last part, some sort of bass to hold it all down. I chose a cello, which I hope comes through on this. So this one pretty much lived in like the center the whole time. So if I'm remembering correctly, handbells definitely lived in surrounds. The glockenspiel, piano spiel lived in left, right. Some of the verb was sent to the surround for that. Same with the music box, so that was definitely more of a left, right, like central element to it. So it was coming from on screen. Cello definitely like centered, or LFE. So like the low frequency sub kind of part. Same with the ghosty. So this plays with some of the whispers and the sound effects that I'll get to. The bassy plays right up front, hits that LFE hard, so it's like, whoa, this is going to be ominous. The diminished scared kind of, it shifted around a little bit because like at the shot we hear it, we kind of have Clarice realizing that she's in danger. Like this is a bad moment in the story right now. So that kind of shifts around as this unstable, dissonant sounding thing. And in the end, the pizzicato strings, I'm pretty sure we're just stereo left, right. Just as like an additive closing layer. So it all layers together really well. And again, to just zoom out on the whole project, there were so many spots where there's just like no music. And even like these bits in between the sort of bookends were like these tiny little stings, not even full music or full pieces. So I was really happy that I was able to use such little music in my final and let a lot of the sound effects speak for this. And I guess we'll dive right into sound effects. So as I said earlier, this was like my biggest focus for why I chose this piece. I thought it would be sound effects only and I could go nuts on it. It wasn't sound effects only in the end, but I still had to go nuts on it. So the hardest stuff that I had to design lives here, given how visually complicated it is. It's not hard to navigate. It's just separated out in a lot more intense looking way, and it's super tied to the action on screen. So the first thing I'll do, just because it's kind of, it's present, but it's not the meat of the piece, is the Foley. So another huge thank you to Alexandre for being my Foley artist for a lot of this stuff. Some cool logo footsteps, the umbrella opening for the studio logo that I redesigned. And then just stuff like the footsteps, her backpack. I think he played with some kind of like plant for the doll sounds. Yeah, so something like scratchy, clothy for picking up this like raggedy doll in the woods. Then some grassy footsteps. Doll out from the backpack here, which is super light. This is kind of like Clarice fishing out the doll. So just like filling in the gaps that you don't really see on screen, but it's still part of the whole action. And by itself, it's not too impressive, but now the footsteps continue here, but when I was mixing, I totally dipped them out because the focus was this super scary face that we're seeing, and everything else at the point was much more important. So there's all these ghosts, there's a big tree whoosh, all that sort of thing. But then the Foley comes back in, she looks at the doll, picks it up, lots of handling. I threw this through a reverb that I copied the settings from the Limbo Wise project. Because I was like, oh, there's like Limbo's project out that you can check out in Wise. Wonder what their reverb settings were. And so I got it as close as I could. So in the final mix that you hear on Vimeo, it's so subtle underneath everything, but I thought it was a really fun touch. moving on from that, I'll keep this master fader just in case. So the backgrounds are the next thing I had in my notes to talk about. These, I'm still really proud of a lot of the work I did on these backgrounds. A lot of it was pushing what I can do with a bunch of really cool plugins and unorthodox sources. And I'll step through the environments first before going layer by layer on some of the cooler ones, I think. So we had this first sort of peaceful forest as Clarice is wandering around. Something super chill. You'd probably hear it on like a white noise machine or like a CD to help you fall asleep. But a really relaxing vibe, and then is contrasted by this darker wood sound that has a lot more of these abstract textures. So we really get this eerie, like these weird tones, some like whispery stuff going on in the background. The breeze even changes. So we get more of this dark, muffled, like cold sound. Then back when she sees her father, we get another peaceful, quiet forest scene, but different settings. It's a lot more empty because we're not surrounded by trees, so we don't need all the leaves and stuff. Chase scene, we go back to the same dark woods, pretty much, mixed down so that all the crazy creature anger can come through. But it's the same tone to establish that it's like, yeah, we've returned to this scary space that Clarice was in. And there's not too much action going on there because the focus is in the background at that point. So then as Clarice is running through the woods, we get these layers again. Which just has the track, the magic moonbeams, the wind breeze, the camel ambience. I'll get to that in probably a minute. And then as the doll falls and the sun properly sets, as the sun sets, these creepy voices come back in. And it really leans into these misty voices because it's this like, ooh, scary. And there's a different magic moon tone that comes out in contrast. So it's a lot lower. That like lower pitch is like more threatening in a way. And then we sit on these three as the creature is like snarling at her from behind the shadows. She kind of gets up. Now on the head tilt, I cut these two layers. Which that one should have a proper fade on it. Don't know why it doesn't. Anyway. And then when the hands hit there, it's like as quiet as you can be without there being silence. Just this one quiet little wind track. And then we get this darker ambience coming back in to fill it out. Still a lot lighter than the full like 4 to 5 layer version. But still quiet because there's chaos going on up here, which is a lot of fun. Then in the end, we return to the same sort of layers. Oops. We get some crickets as it's nighttime, the creature's sleeping. Through the credits, we still hold on this because the layers were really cool. And because they were pushed so far into surround and like coding the audience, I figured it would be good as like a cool down from all the horror and the scares to just sit in this atmosphere for a while the credits were going. Yeah, so those are the backgrounds. Those are super cool. So talking through the design on these, the dark forest, the more creative ones. This first one is called Camel because I used like a camel groan sound. So this sort of like weird camel noises, and ran it through a whole bunch of processes. A whole bunch of favorites that I used were probably Wormhole to get all sorts of pitchy frequency shifting effects. Adaptiverb was huge. It's the sort of musical reverb plugin. So running super stretched out camels that have been pitched up and are doing weird things. Some modulation with phasers maybe. I'm forgetting what layer I actually used the phasers on. I think they were on the camels. But like using that and then running it through this crazy reverb got this weird sound. Where there's very subtly still like a groan beneath all that, but there's a lot more of that musical tone that sort of sets it as a magic space. The mist voices I took from the Walla recordings of these creepy whispers reading out stuff that a bunch of people in the class recorded for various pieces. So we got together as a class, we shouted or did whatever lines we had to for crowds and other pieces. For mine, it was just a group of whispers saying all these short little phrases of like, oh, it's a gift from the woods, touch it, don't touch it, like all this weird sort of stuff that when you put it together, it's this globulous liquidy thing. So that was run through, I think, a guitar rig setting that had a bunch of delays and reverb, and then I think space as well, since that was stapled onto the file here. Can't remember what setting I did. I think it was a reverse reverb into like forward reverb kind of thing. So like cross-verbing it to turn it from these sorts of voices as like a preview. Like those kind of cleaner voices that still have a lot of effects to them, into more of like a flat bed that wouldn't grab your attention too much. The next cool thing was the magic moonbeams. These definitely leaned on Adaptiverb pretty hard, and then vary speed to get different pitches out of it. So you get these resonant peaks. These were made by like grabbing sorts of magic. I think some of the samples were called like fairy as well. So these sort of tingly magic things, letting them run and then putting it through Adaptiverb to kind of produce these different chordal tones that aren't quite in a key or an exact chord, but it kind of gives the texture of a chord. And this low drony, what was this guy? So I think this one's a fun one. I had a classmate named Andre in my class as well. He did another sort of horror piece, game trailer for Evil Within. And there's a lot of like creepy religious imagery to it, being that it's Evil Within. And so there was one night we're all working really late in the classroom, and he brings a mic up to his editing rig and starts recording a bunch of weird noises that he just wants to use. One of them being like this baby lamb sound. And I was like, yo, that actually sounded like really good for just recording that at your desk. Can you please send that to me? And I took that, stretched it, reversed it, made this like looping bed of like Andre doing this weird lamb sound. And then it kind of produced this low presence tone. Like there's not a lot of info encoded to it. It just feels heavy. It feels like a weight in this environment. Like we've entered this darker place and it's like weighing on Clarice as she's trying to figure out where she is. So that was a lot of the backgrounds work. Still really stoked on a bunch of that. There's some really cool sounds in there still. Going up to these higher layers of sound effects, I'll look through the musical tones for different areas first. So at key moments, there's sort of the 3 moments that have these tones in place of scary music. So I'll just play through the ones as Clarice is approaching the doll. So those are the 3 layers I used the most. When the creature's upset and gets real mad, I just used the distorted shepherd tone. I think this was made in Ableton, and I used, like, of all things, Little Altar Boy to do the shepherd tone effect. And it came out pretty cool. It sounds, like, really disturbing. So that one. And then, looks like I changed the layers up for the chase scene. But altogether, it's a similar kind of stuff for the chase. The one thing I just noticed, you could hear the shepherd tone start to loop a bit here. Just because I had to stretch it longer than I had originally made it. I think I made it for like 20 seconds. So kind of hear it go there. I did tie it to the action though, which in the full mix helps it blend a bit better. Is you get that short little riser as the doll goes through the air. So it sort of resets on the throwing action. These were all pretty cool. Shepherd tone. Soloed already. Huge scary. The haunting vocals here. It's like taking some of those uncanny MIDI choir samples, just letting it run. And did this one have a touch of dumpster fire to it? No, this one didn't. It just sounded scary enough on its own. Because you get that vocal presence, but it's definitely not like what it's supposed to be. You know, like when you hear voice, it's not supposed to be like, oh, like scary. This one was the dumpster fire layer. So, help me out. Freak Show Industries. There we go. So there's a plugin from Freak Show Industries called Dumpster Fire, which I can just pull open here. I don't know why I didn't. And just looking at this thing, this is scary. Like, this produces some really scary tones. And so I ran that over, I think, the choir sample, and then just didn't rename my clip because I was lazy editor. But it comes out with this, like, ugh, like, I do not like this dissonant sounding thing. So that layer has like a lot of the power from this one, especially once we hit this point and I kind of fade into a more intense version. So what I did was, I think I ran Dumpster Fire in Ableton because for whatever reason it wasn't playing nice with Pro Tools at home. So I ran it through Ableton and I just kept increasing the, let's reopen it again. Yeah, big agree, Roshan. Freak Show is super OP. Their plugins are phenomenal. And super cheap, too. So all I would do is increase this guy a little bit. So it kind of increases the level of bend you start getting. Oh, wait. Let's run through these again. Generates hellscapes. Yeah. So this sort of sets the number of bands that are kind of going up and getting twisted around by this big knob, the teeth knob. This kind of spaces out how far the bands are. It kind of creates more of like a chorusy effect as it goes, almost. That's probably not the actual technicals. It's just what I thought about them. This is probably set to slightly different directions. That influences the sort of movement you get, I believe. Scale is the eighth of time spread. Yeah, so that's spread, and then that's pitch spread. So yeah, it sort of creates more of a dissonance depending on how you set it. And then I would take the teeth from like this to like whoop. So, oops, turn the targeting off. Let's find a normal layer and run with it. So let's take Poor Coolin. Poor Coolin. And let's run him through.
Another day, another aimless adventure of little Paradise. She wishes to discuss something, making curious friends along the way. Absorbed in the horror of Wonderland, she feels no path uncovered. Always searching, hoping for that something. Another day, another aimless adventure.
Like, it goes from pretty like normal, awesome performance
Another day, another aimless adventure.
into
Another day, another aimless adventure of little Paradise. She discuss something, making curious friends along the way. Absorbed the forest of Wonderland.
So if you run that over an already distorted horror tone, you get this like super disturbing sound. So that's really playing into a lot more of the like explicit horror in this piece. And that was a ton of fun. So those layers down, it's time to talk about the big meat of the piece. Something I hope people were more curious about, and I sort of delayed to get to this point. And that's the creature. The creature voice took a lot of attempts. I believe the final version was version 6. I had to redesign it a lot to actually find something that fit the vibe I was going for, but also didn't come across as terribly transparent in what I did. So you get a bunch of layers of creatures. You get a vocal performance that I threw a ton of takes at to get the right, like, oh my god, what is that? Like a human element to this terrifying creature voice. So if we grab that one, eerie but alluring doll. No, it's not it. Okay. Oops. Don't want to throw the whole thing at you. Ooh, scary. And then the actual chase and the build up to it. Let's get all the layers going. I think that's it. Super rude. Did that just not play the thing? Yeah, it didn't. I totally grabbed the wrong spots. Oops. No worries. We'll grab, I think, all those. So tons of growling. Here's some actual camel. So that's kind of what a camel sounds like when it's just like groaning and... There's some creature yells. So that was something that I recorded out. And it took me a bit to totally crack the code on how to voice and perform this creature. So in the chase scene, there's a ton of me just yelling and screeching that I ran through effects right here. A lot of that is an inhaled voice because that naturally sounds really creepy. So that already is like, what the hell? But I ran it through Wormhole, this like pitch plugin, which I should also pull up, for example. This guy. So this can get some really sick, low-sounding tones out of it. Again, if we use Coolin's vocal as our guinea pig here. Let's choose these two.
Unaware of what may hide within, she heads back home with her intriguing item in tow.
So I can do that. What's one of the like beast processes? Big Creature 6, maybe.
Unaware of what may hide within, she heads back home with her intriguing item in tow.
So it already gets that like low tone that if you throw over like creature voices and snarls and stuff. Gets you in that place. The big fix I had to make at pretty much the 11th hour was I got called out for just pitch shifting a voice recording super fast, like super quick in instructor panel. And so I was like, okay, definitely got to rethink this if it's that transparent and almost immersion breaking because you can tell it's just a voice kind of thing. So what I ended up doing was, I think, a classic recording technique with like tape, where you record yourself kind of doing the vocal you want to do. And then you pitch that up. Sorry, you make it twice as fast so it's an octave higher kind of thing. So that you replicate that recording as your main recording. And then when you stretch it out, it sounds more natural. And it doesn't just sound like you pitch shifted it. It sounds like it was recorded and lived at that lower octave to begin with. So that was the big fix that I had to make. Alexa just said the voice reminds me of Fiddlesticks. That was a huge inspiration for the creature, actually. I watched a behind the scenes with the voice actor for the Fiddlesticks rework on League of Legends, and he talked about the inhale voice and like the sort of mix of creatures and stuff that he would put into Fiddlesticks. And I'm not that talented at all. So I just did the inhale voice, which if you're not practiced with it, warning, do not do it. It'll like wreck your throat. Be super careful. But because I could actually do that, that's what I leaned on super hard. And it came out with this like, oh my God, this insane thing. I should probably turn that down. That's pretty loud. And then the snarls that are inhale snarls, and you just have to deep breath it in RX to get rid of, inhaling. Which I can still hear the breath sort of coming into my nose on that one. But among all the yelling, it's like, it's a growl. As long as you can make out the growl, it's not too big of a deal. More creature yelling here. I think this is more untouched. Okay, yeah, this is untouched, actually. The one above has the wormhole and full processing on it. Freaky, right? And then this one is how it sounded coming out of my throat. So that puts in like the actual smaller human part to it. Because when looking at the piece, the creature wasn't an inherently evil thing. The creature was just like a scared being that wanted its doll back. It's precious kind of thing. And so I kept in these smaller layers throughout all of the creature voices. Something small, something kind of human and relatable in a sort of sense. So that despite this big bellowing voice from this giant mouth kind of thing, it is a small creature. Going to the end, and I'll talk through these layers in a second, but going to the end, it's a pretty thin, small creature. And so I played it as just something that was frightened and just wanted its thing back, as opposed to something inherently evil, beyond time, that sort of thing. So running through the chase scene, this is where all the animals start stacking up here in the layers. So I'll run through a few of them, why I added them in, and what they sort of add to the general creature voice that's not just filling it with more noise for the sake of noise. So running just the creature here. Forgive a bit of the tree crunching. In order to fit this on a hardware mixer, a lot of stuff is kind of stacked on channels, so you don't get individual channels for just the creature. So I'll run through this whole bit as just the creature voice. Totally missed one. Then we get this yell. And something a little like... like kind of almost sad, but in a weird way, a little cute. So yeah, altogether the layers. A lot of it is just my vocal performance killing my throat. Small confession to stream. A lot of this was just stress from the work and being like, oh my God, like I'm coming to the end of this project and it has to be like perfect because they tell you not to, but as a student, part of you goes like, my career is riding on how good this final is kind of thing. And so it was the most like intense final vocal session, genuinely like outletting a ton of emotion. So maybe not the healthiest form of acting, but it worked for the creature. There's some of these like phrases you just like you kind of move your mouth and get phrases going. Those sound so cool. Like sort of shrieky thing. It sounds like the classic overused monster sample, but it's not. It's just a similar tone. It's a fun time. So that one's like pretty dry as well, like just what my throat would have produced. It was funny as I'm like shrieking into this NDG3 in in the editing lab. I could hear other people that were in the basement of the campus going like, dude, what the hell was that? Like, what was that? This kind of like lower throaty thing. I guess to tie into that, I use these sort of choking samples from a library because they just had the proper like tone to it. Something breathy, intense. Horses, I also used a lot. Like you get these big horse breaths in there because horses breathe real heavy. And some other. Something there. More of a detail that you don't pick up until you're on like massive speakers kind of thing. But it sounded cool. And then the kind of like bird-like in a way. So what else do we got here? A lot of snarls. So I put a snarl before each of these weird bites. Or I guess that's a hand grab. The bites, could have done it better. I used the metal because I wanted the teeth to sound sharp and they were coming from the surround. So when you're in the theater, it sounds like the bites are behind you as like Clarice is running and we see her perspective. Not great, and the chase scene is honestly something I'd be curious to tackle again or something similar. I know I found a piece to redesign that has a lot of similar elements to this one. So I think I'll give it a go there and see if I can do better teeth gnashing. But I put a snarl before those. And that's just the like inhale snarls going. Deep breathed and then lowered. Still got that. The Cursed Earth hand. This is a lesson in being careful with temp. Because this is a temp just to have a sound there for a review. And eventually it fit because it had this like grossness to it that like, oh no, the creature got Clarice. So it just kind of stuck. I do wish I came up with a sound for that more, but I guess it fits, you know. Now, what else did we have? This big yell is where we really get like the whole smorgasbord of animals. So one of it's this like upset pig scream, which pigs sound horrifying. Real scary. We got snake hisses, alligator snorts, something for that like breathy, threatening, hissy thing. Because like instinctually, it's sort of like a primal like, oh fuck, don't go near that thing. Alligator hisses. The creature yells. More snake. My original idea was to use elk. Because elk have this like nice mix of the really pure tone at the end of their calls, but then this like super dissonant tone at the start. which in real life, if you're like out in the woods at night and you hear this horrifying like tone, it's an elk. But when it's bounced around the trees and you kind of get it as this like unidentified thing, it's terrifying. And so that's the idea I started with. And I mean, look at this thing. This creature needs a lot more than just elk going on. But in the end, I wanted to leave that in as like a nod to the original inspiration I had and still get that flavor. Oh yeah, up top there's more snake hisses. Just keeping it going, keeping it scary. Then there's this banshee scream that at first I didn't have or think of. This is kind of just a library sound. And it's a little like over the top. But when you really play it back with like everything going on, it adds that extra guttural punch of like, oh my god. So without it, but then with it, it has a lot more of that shrieking presence. Fills it out good. So Roshan asked, did you use slapback on the sound effects? Some of them for sure. More of the... What did I run through like an actual delay to get more of the slap of the forest trees? That would have been some of the creature feet, grassy sounds, its movements. The voice definitely had a touch of it, though I think I trusted some of the early reflections on the verb I had originally set for this. Foley's a little bit too at moments, not a ton, and they had their own delay. I think it was the same setting though. Different bus, same delay. As noted here, Chase being a big section that was a little undercooked, but still came out all right, was this clip that's like, grassy underfoot needs redo. Because it was supposed to have the crunch of the grass as this thing's running, and yeah, I guess I just didn't get to redo it. I added this grudgy movement from one of my instructor's recommendations, the like cracky bones as it's moving around. When isolated, it sounds really rough. But altogether, it gives that the unnatural movement to everything. If I just try the... So there's a bit of a creature scream here, warning for that. But altogether, this is sort of like the movement. It's all right. And then the creature feet. I had a note for this more in the reflection at the end that we're coming close to now. But this is something that I try to find a shortcut for, and I really shouldn't have. I should have just done the edit, given this creature some proper feet, and put in the time. And done it early, of course. But I thought I could shortcut it by just putting the elements into a contact patch, playing around with it, roughly in sync, correcting a little bit. But given how like stuttery the animation is, like if you look at this thing's feet, it's kind of like following the sync is a little weird because it is like a very snappy animation. It's like very fast to follow. Doesn't have the most natural sounding thing, and we don't see its back feet as well. So sort of like editing horses, as long as you cover something for the sync, the rest is kind of like, it can just have its own rhythm and sort of fit in. But that's something I really shouldn't have a shortcut. I should have had proper edits of, okay, here's the thumps, here's the grassy, like earthy crunch with the weight of its steps, here's maybe even its movements, the bone cracking as it like lands its feet every time, and you get that grudgy like ugh. So that's a lot of the creature. Other enhancers. Just checking my like flashcards here. I'm not sure if I had other enhancers for the creature. Oh, the ending. How could I forget the ending? So in the end, we had a scary time. This creature chased Clarice and by proxy the audience through the woods. So in this one, the final shot, it was up to me to kind of like convince everyone that the creature was all right, you know? So in the end, I went with these smaller layers. So it's having a nice sleep. It's comfortable with its doll. We use some cuter sounds, even though we keep some of the eeriness. I forget if Alex or I did the weird weeping for this creature. Just like some huffy breaths. Yeah, it came out more huffy. Just because, like, the thing is still, like, kind of big and long and lanky. So it needs something deep and heavy for the breath. I recorded myself doing a weird, like, snoring. Peaceful snoring. And then to sell the cuteness, the cougar cub whining was used. Then this one's like super cute. Big stretch. Real cute. And that's kind of all the creature. So the other sound effects. So these are more one-offy. Really depends on the picture. One of them I was stoked on was this bug. Because in the opening, we have a very short time to make it cute before it's scary. So this bug was one of the aspects that kept it really cute at the start. So we had some weird bug vocals, and we had our bug footsteps. So altogether, this was our bug. So the bug footsteps were real fun to do. I just did like some mouth pops, like, and then like pitched them around to get all the different feet. And I used this sort of like boing for the tail going up and down. So altogether we get this like cool little bug. It kind of has this nice rhythm. The bug gargles and chews. This was Alex's work. Thank you, Alex. He killed it on this weird bug thing. So I did some weird like chewing. And then Alex had this weird gargly thing that I pitched up just to sell it was from a smaller creature. The like sells it for me. Like that sort of cut between. It's like so it kind of keeps it cute, a little quirky, a little weird. Pretty fun time there. The next bit, the whispers. All right, so now I can talk about these more. So this was all Walla. I wrote down a bunch of phrases that were almost like the trees warning Clarice not to mess with this thing that's like so unfamiliar. Not to touch the doll, but also to tempt her with the doll. So it's kind of like playing with her a bit. You don't really know what's going on. Now, does anyone hear the script that I wrote for Walla? Well, no. It just helps sell it in the recording to get the right mood for the actors, that sort of thing. From the performance, there were some cleaner moments that I got to take, so you do get some words out. Like in this one of the Walla performers read the line like, "Curious Explorer." And so I sat on that as a bit of a cleaner signal. We get like Curious Explorer in that one. We sort of get like the echoey reverb on the on like the Explorer kind of thing. There too, so just layered up as this big like, ooh, what's it gonna be? So really playing out with that. And then using those at all points where the doll's present as one of the doll layers. Some weird reverses. Which if we take and have some quick audio fun with, if we just flip it and reverse it, we got. So you can start hearing more of the phrases when you reverse it back to forwards again. And the panning on it. Yeah, I guess if you watch this number right here, or maybe just this thing. So you can see it kind of moves all around as it plays. So it like bounces around. It's this thing that doesn't really follow the rules because it's like ghost voices. So it can bounce around, be weird, and really just set a mood. So those are the cool ghost voices, all used through like different guitar rig setups or a bunch of reverb and delay chains. There's the doll callouts, which was like a cry from the doll. So that was another doll sound. That I think was run through a small touch of dumpster fire on like a A-B sort of setup. And this one was actually children crying, I think. Like an actual like crying sound. Because it's just like, it's uncomfortable. So a bit clearer. Does a bunch of that. Another layer for the doll was these shakers, because it feels right. Feels right. That's a reason. I mostly thought of the Koroks from Breath of the Wild and how their faces would shift around as you look at them, and they'd have this like shakery feel. And because it was like this thing in the woods that kind of had this texture, like you can see the sticks for the limbs. It's very of the woods. And so, yeah. Using the shaker, also thinking of the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time. The shaker really fits this kind of weird entity in the forest mood. Just like delayed shakers from Contact. And then this like crescendo, she gets close. And then it strikes one more time as she sort of is like in this place. She's scared. She hears this bird from behind her, which I put in. So that's what's kind of like sets her off in this one. In the original, she kind of just like looks over her shoulder. I wanted to tie something to it as like a paranoid checking over your shoulder. That sounds was a note, Beck says. You mean like the vocal tones, like the crying, or the shakers? Because both are, when stacked up as like the doll's sound, is kind of freaky for sure. Wait, what's O-O-O? Oh, I think this was like the wind rolling in as the creature approaches from behind Clarice. Oh, and there's also the devil dog sound. So that's the really like distinct throat growly for there. Both the vocals more. Yeah, the vocals are the scary ones. Like twisting vocals, because it is a very human sound, the voice. And so when you start like messing with that, some of the smallest touches can get so freaky because in a weird way, your brain knows like, hey, humans aren't supposed to make that sound. And so it's really entertaining to mess with that and play with like vocal tones a lot. But yeah, there's that wind sound. What is it? There's this bit where she's running past the, like blazing through the forest, trying to get this doll back before sundown. And so I had this recording with Alex. Again, Alex, huge MVP. Recorded a bunch of like branch swooshes to get these like whips by the camera. And then the moon down cross verb. Sort of this like magic sound that's like, oh man, shit's getting real now. The eerie but alluring doll comes back for the sound that Bex had called out. Bex also asked, do you also get freaked out mixing out the sounds? Sometimes. Sometimes, absolutely. I was lucky enough that I got a lot of my mix theater time and mix lab time during not maybe like daylight hours, but working hours, you know, when people should be awake. But closer to deadline on some of the final edits and like final recordings alone in the school basement in the mix suite. Yeah, sometimes it's really freaky. But at the same time, that was kind of the moment that I knew I was on the right track with like presenting something, is like when the chase scene became less chaotic. It's still kind of chaotic, but when it became less chaotic and more like, oh God, this creature is like after me. It's like, okay, it's coming out. The story's coming across. The mood is totally right. So yeah, it totally can freak you out if you're working at like 2 a.m. and you've barely gotten sleep that week. And I'm already like, any sort of horror movie that centers around like a weird woodland creature from like some Lovecraftian timeline or whatever, like anything like that gets under my skin already. So working with this piece was a fun challenge because like I knew I could probably do action trailers and sci-fi especially. I love doing like synthetic sci-fi textures and whatever. So I wanted to choose something natural. And then horror was a genre I wouldn't have thought to have worked with if I wasn't looking for something brand new. Originally, I'd wanted to do the Blair Witch trailer that was at E3 that year, but I couldn't get permissions in time. But I found this, and I think this was way more of an original choice to go with and really stands out because of it. And Something's Awry Productions, Chris Theron from them answered my email like requesting if I could use it and redesign it in like 10 minutes. So like huge shout outs to them for being super awesome to work with. Signed paperwork like instantly, like zero headache with getting this piece. They were phenomenal. They also had a more recent one that was a bit more colorful, had a lot more tentacles and Lovecraft going on, but this one really fit because it did the scary forest. It had a freaky creature, like it just checked the boxes for me. But yeah, this moon down cross verb, which I think was the moon sound that I reverbed, reversed, reverb that. So you get this like super weird mess of just like tone. It's a fun technique when you just need stuff to have movement. Then the doll gets dropped and you get the freaky voice and all the layers again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Snarls, bites. I think that covers most of the really cool one-shots. Oh, yeah. So I had to, I noticed this because I only had a few limited dialogue tracks for how I edited my mix session, just so I could fit more stuff on screen and I could see it all. Usually there's supposed to be like, I think like 7 or so tracks in dialogue. I cut it down so I could save the space because I just didn't need it. I had a narrator, sometimes 2 characters. This was a moment where I would have needed one more track because I wanted to blend Clarice's voice here into the next shot and kind of like echo out the last shot as it fades. But then it immediately starts with the action. So I kind of ran out of time. So I bumped it down into sound effects. And as a huge note, if you're actually doing an edit for like a short film or what have you, be super mindful if you have to move tracks like that, because if you're asked to spit out stems, like if you're like spitting out an M&E so they can dub dialogue over in a different language or what have you, super make sure that nothing, even if it is super affected from dialogue, is in those tracks. This one, because it was my final and it was like the last few days and I knew it wasn't going to touch anything, it was kind of fine. But be super careful because then you're going to have this trace of voice, even if it is heavily affected and is sound effects at that point, it's still going to come through. And when they do the dub in whatever language, it's not going to match. So super careful. But altogether, we get this final like Clarice moment where she's just tired walking out of the woods. Then this final cross. Yeah. So I think that's a final fun moment. The Wraith breath. So like other one shots, just a bridge cuts. Or the scary doll cry. And I believe that covers pretty much everything. Yeah. All in all, this was like a really sweet piece to work with, and I'm glad that I found it early enough to choose it as my final, and that it was so much fun to work with, and I just got to go nuts on it because it was like living at school. So overall, some reflection here, and for a change of scenery, I'll just pop up my my slideshow here. So some ending notes, some lesson learned. It's okay to scrap and redo stuff. Like the voice was on version 6 for this final. And it wouldn't have sounded as good if I was insistent on like, no, I have to, this is my original vision. It has to be this elk sound. Because like, no, even when it was like adding my vocal performance and adding animals, I did have to go back, redo it. And it came out a lot better from re-recording it and using a different technique as soon as I got like, oops, sorry, just wanted to flip that. But as soon as it got called out and like deconstructed in a second, I was like, okay, yeah, it needs something. It still needs some tweaks. Also redoing things, the creature footsteps I noted earlier, I really wish that I had gone back and redid it. I had the clip with a note saying to redo it that I pointed out as well. It's okay to redo stuff, especially when it's early on. I'm still super early on in like sound designing and whatever. So there's so much learning to do that if you have to go back, if you come across a better idea and you're like, oh man, I should do that for this other sound I already finished. Like if you have the time, of course, because deadlines are a thing, but if you have the time, like throw it in, make it a better product overall. Like there's no harm in realizing you have a better idea and just going with it. Also be open to ideas that you didn't originally start with, like with the dialogue for this piece. It was going to be a silent sound effects piece, and hearing my instructor like do some mock narration over top and seeing like, oh man, that totally fits. That's amazing. That completely changed the trajectory of the project and sounded awesome in the end. Actually conveyed the story really well and wasn't just this ambiguous, here's some cool sound. And it really focuses on telling the story, and it's just another note that it is about story. And so with that, telling the story better, that was the best option to take. The father voice, I played a very short clip, but I did some short exertions for the father, like, like when Clarice comes home and whatnot. My biggest note, really thinking about this, is if you're going to do your own voice in a piece you're working on, call someone in to direct you, even if it is someone who doesn't do sound, isn't familiar with it. Just have someone there to kind of hold you accountable, maybe give suggestions, because it should just sound right to people. There should be a like, oh, that sounds convincing. That sounds like the vision you described to me. Alternatively, just don't use your voice in your own work and just call in a friend and direct them. It's going to be a lot easier than like second guessing if your voice is really a good fit and then having to like pitch shift it to where when it's put in isolation, it really doesn't sound that good. So that was something I would have done, is I would have bugged someone else in class to do some exertions for me. Getting the music edit done very early. This was a tip we got from one of our instructors before we started, like months before we started our final, was like, get your music edit done first, if anything, especially if you're doing work with a composer, so that if you want to get any fixes in, it's still possible and you're not running the clock on the deadline. This was awesome. I bugged Alex to compose this like way in advance. I think like 5 weeks in advance. And he wrote it in like a day or two. And then I didn't realize it was just going to be MIDI for a while. I thought I was going to get the whole instrumental work from him. So realizing it was just MIDI, but still having like 3 weeks to figure something out, I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is fine. I'm not like pulling my hair out yet because I got started early. Also using surrounds. This was a comment more at grad and is hard to convey through a stereo stream on YouTube. But the surrounds and really pushing content out to them to surround the theater did come across fairly well. There were like super positive reactions to it, especially when it came to backgrounds, just sitting in those environments and having that envelop the theater. If you're able to, and you get a piece that's like animated and gives you the freedom to go nuts with that sort of thing, take advantage of it. Like super take advantage of it. It also frees up space for other sounds to play across the screen. So it's kind of like it's just a win-win if you get the option to mix in 5.1, 7.1, Atmos, what have you. Some regrets and observations. The chase. Oh man, the chase. The voice. The creature voice starts to fall apart. The edit just doesn't sound so good in the middle. Mostly where it's like Clarice's perspective. Let's pull that up again. We sort of get her perspective as she's running. It's sort of around, like, we get the first charge. That's cool. This one's cool. This one's okay. Like the creature here. But it's around there when it gets kind of quiet. We just get the teeth. It's around, like, this middle part where it falls apart. It's not as cool. This initial scream here sounds cool. This is where it falls apart again because it's still high intensity. Maybe I should have ducked it out. I'm really thinking it's more of an edit that I should have had like a big creature breath or something to give like a diegetic pause to it, not just a mix pause. Where this part, it doesn't hit. And the ending, it sweeps up good, but the bass tone beneath this throw, I'm not convinced. So there's a bunch of stuff that I would still have liked to have done a lot better if I had maybe another week with it. The creature footsteps, as noted above, is like, that's something I really should have just carefully edited instead of looking for that shortcut. And the next note is looking for shortcuts or assuming an idea would work the first time. In my early instructor meetings on this, I was farther behind pacing than I should have been. Definitely caught up for the end. And I think my working style is like starting off a lot more theoretical, playing with ideas, and then getting a ton of the work done near the back half towards the deadline. It's kind of just how my workflow has gone so far. And it's good to be aware of that so I can plan for it accordingly. But I had assumed that the elk sound would have been perfect. It would have, oh yeah, just stretch out this elk and I use this elk tone throughout the whole piece for this creature, right? And when it didn't work, it was like, okay, well, what do I do now? You know? So never assume that an idea is going to work the first time until you have whatever, like 10, 15 years under your belt kind of thing. Which I still don't. So with everything, it's like, okay, if I have an idea that I think is going to be really cool, do it right away and find out if it is actually cool. But don't give it like, oh yeah, I'm gonna record some Foley. I'm gonna do some backgrounds, like the easy work kind of thing. Don't do the easy work and be like, no, because this idea is just gonna work. It's a great idea. Always test it. Never assume. Never look for shortcuts. Like the moments where I'd go through the project and say, yeah, this there's a lot of craziness going on here. So in the context of this, it sounds fine. While editing, I never really had that thought. It was always I'd edit, and then when you go to review and mix it, you're like, oh, do I really need to hear 5 layers of backgrounds with all these sound effects? No, not really. So then you can start stripping it away to clean it up. But while editing, just do everything. Unless someone's already told you, like your head mixer or your lead or what have you, just cover everything. And if you need to strip it away at the end, strip it away. It's cool. But don't look for shortcuts in work. As one of my instructors had said, if it's difficult to do, it means you're doing it right. Because, hey, if it was easy, we wouldn't get paid for this kind of work. So it is kind of hard. Put in the work, and it will come out better. That sort of thing. overall, that's kind of all I wanted to cover this stream. I was thinking of doing more work after this, but probably going to take a pause. I didn't realize that talking constantly for, what's it been now, like hour and a half or so? Yeah, my throat's feeling it. Anyway, thanks for everyone who's tuning in. I see 5 current viewers. Super appreciate everyone coming in. Bex, Roshan, Alexa, Tequila Otter. Thank you a ton for hopping in the chat, throwing some comments in there. At present, I don't really have a set stream schedule. I'll probably be figuring that out more for next week once I get a couple more resumes sent out. I'm kind of a professional resume writer at the moment. But follow me at HiImCurtisMc on everything. That's my link for everything. Also, please subscribe to this YouTube channel for future streams. I'm also aiming to get to 100 subs because when you get 100 subs, you can customize your URL, and I would love for my URL to match my everything else with HiImCurtisMc. Also, direct message me on like Instagram or Facebook to talk some shop, maybe play some games. I'm probably going to hit some Genshin Impact after that. It's been a pretty fun game so far, so if you happen to play, let me know. But otherwise, thanks a ton for tuning in. Oh, thanks, Roshan. Super appreciate the good luck, good talk. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a super fantastic night. And I'll figure out preview mode eventually, but I'll leave you on the super cute cat with the different text and some fat beats to hang out to.